So Ryan, you're in Atlanta, right?
I am in Atlanta.
Can you do me a favour, mate? Can
Sure.
you can you go round to UPS and pick up a parcel for me?
I'd be happy to. I
Because I
assume that
think
then means the parcel is mine at that point.
it's not worth very much, mate. But it would probably be easier for me to walk from England to Atlanta and get the parcel rather than get UPS deliver it at the moment because I've been having a few problems with them. Um, and there's a bit about what the show's about today, okay? But I'm not gonna use this as a moaning session. But but have you never know? I'm not going to use this as a moaning session, but
But let me know. Yes.
they do a really incredible job of not talking to customers. They do a really every time I've sent this package from England to the States, and the long and short of it is it was meant to be international priority. It's now 10 days since it was meant to be delivered. It was meant to take 2 days. I paid for 2 days, and it hasn't turned up. And it's been a litany of problems. But the biggest issue for me that I find annoying is they have done an incredibly good job at not wanting to communicate. And I'm going to say the word communicate because that means that it's also not just, it's not that I just want to phone them,
Right.
but I just can't communicate with them.
Yeah.
And they've done an incredibly good job at cutting down all the points where you would not typically go, okay, I'll send them an email, I'll go on chat, I'll do this, I'll do that, and you can't do it. Basically, it's just a nightmare.
So let's back up. So you packaged something up in England. I assume it was something very English, like a bag of tea and some crumpets or
It
something.
was,
And
yes, it was. It was, yeah, and some jam and some
yeah,
scones and stuff like
just like a Ziploc bag full of hot tea and
that.
some crumpets, whatever those
It
are.
was leaking out the bottom. Whether that's the problem, I'm
Right.
not sure.
Right. Some like crystallized colonialism or something. I don't know, whatever it is that people in England should. Yeah, no, I mean, there's nothing more frustrating than not being able to tell someone when there's a problem.
Yes,
I feel very alone.
yes. I think it's probably confounded by the fact that I am a naive shipper.
Yeah.
So at the very beginning of this whole process, they said, so I've basically gone online and I've gone, I want a package. A friend of mine went and picked up some stuff. He sent it over to me. So I went online and I put all the details in, pick it up from Dave's house, deliver it to my house in America. So one of the things they said to me was, are you the shipper, the receiver, or the sender? And I went, I don't know, actually. So I guess I'm the shipper, but I'm also, I'm the one that's sending it, but I'm not sending it because it's sort of coming from my mate Dave. Okay.
Mm.
So he's like technically the sender, I guess.
I mean, in UPS's defense, I'm not sure they were anticipating this level of philosophical inquiry when filling out their website. What is the meaning of shipping?
Yes.
I think Nietzsche said it best when
Yes.
this.
Yes.
No, but
No,
yeah, obviously it's the responsibility of the company to make this stuff clear to you. It shouldn't be your job to
well,
figure it
see, so that rather than this show just be me moaning about my UPS package, let's turn it on to what we're going to talk about, which
out.
is
Okay.
a bit about segmentation.
Okay.
Okay. And we actually got a pickle, okay,
Oh,
from
good.
Vijay Patel. Okay. So thank you very much, Vijay, for your
Yes.
pickle. And his pickle basically said was, we're not getting the sales we need. And I secretly wonder whether we're focused on the right segments. How
Mm.
do I ensure my segmentation is correct? Okay. So that's his pickle. And for those of you that don't know, pickle is a business problem that VJ has written into us about. And if you want to write in what your pickle is, then feel free to do so. Just go to beyondphilosophy.com/pickle, beyondphilosophy.com/pickle, and send us your problem. And Ryan and I will pontificate about it.
Be happy to weigh in. I mean,
Now, sorry,
the
go on.
first thing I'll cue in on there is I think he said he secretly wonders. I'd say, Vijay, go ahead and wonder that out loud. Like, raise that question in meetings. I think that is always a good question.
Yes,
Anytime you're struggling with your marketing, honestly, even when things are going well, that is
yes.
always a good question to ask.
It's a very good question. And the reason, just before anybody's going, well, why in the bloody hell did Colin start talking about UPS? Is because I think part of it is down to a bit of segmentation, which is going, they are assuming that I know what I'm doing.
Mm, mm,
And I may be in a small segment, I don't know, but
yeah.
I don't necessarily send a lot. Well, I don't send a lot of packages personally, the team do, but I don't send many packages. And consequently, I'm in this sort of naive shipper,
Yeah.
and I don't even know if I am a shipper. But going, well, have I done the right documents, and have this happened, and maybe actually that they need to recognize the fact that I'm a naive shipper and help me a little bit more than. In fact, I tell you one of the best segmentations I think is around is. Have you ever gone into? Well, you must. I think they have it at Hartsfield in Atlanta where they go. You're going into the airport, and they through security, and they say, "Are you a leisure traveler or a business traveler?" Yeah,
They don't have it at the Atlanta airport that I'm aware of, but I'm
right.
aware that they do that. Are you an experienced traveler, or
Yes,
do you need a little bit more time? Like
yes,
I've traveled both for business as a fairly experienced traveler, not like Colin is experienced in air travel, where they'll just let him pilot the plane sometimes if they need to.
correct.
Um, but I'm an experienced traveler. I have also traveled through the airport with a bunch of kids, like too many kids.
Yes,
And so
yes,
I've been in both, and that kind of segmentation approach to security, I think, has been super helpful. Because if you're traveling with a bunch of kids or with
yeah,
other people who are not experienced, you don't want that pressure of everybody being frustrated at you, right? So
yeah.
that's a great example of segmentation.
And this is a brilliant way of getting on to talk about this subject. Actually, blimey, you know what? People will think we've got a plan, but we haven't.
Yeah,
But there you go.
I'm not
So
sure we're fooling anyone, Colin. Actually,
And this, I'm going to throw this over to you in a minute, but this is about stereotypes.
yeah.
Okay, so let me just build on that for a moment, because obviously stereotypes are, I guess, to a certain extent, a form of segmentation. So here's the issue: have you ever seen that George Clooney film where he goes around the country sacking people?
Yes, up in the air. Is that the name of it?
Something like that, yeah.
Okay.
And one of the things he does there, which I do, and I'm sure loads of seasoned travellers do, is they look if they haven't got those lines,
Hmm.
they look at which line to draw, and I will look at the person and I will go, do they look like they know what they're doing?
Yeah.
Yeah, have they already got the things out of their
Yep.
bag, or are they just idly chatting with their partner, and then when the person turns around to them and says, oh, you need to get your iPad out of the bag, and they go, oh, do I need to get my iPad out of the bag? And you think to yourself, for goodness sake, just get on with it, you know so that is stereotypes, which I guess is the first part of this segmentation. So maybe I'll ask you to comment on that. But again, so this is just around VJ's pickle, which is how does he know that the segmentation is right? And it did make me think that there are a few key questions that people should ask themselves to define whether they've got the right segmentation. And I guess we'll come to that. But do you want to talk to us a bit about stereotypes and stuff like that first?
Well, we'll come back around to stereotypes. I want to hear your
Okay.
questions first. I think that'll because my discussion about stereotypes is a warning
Right.
about when we've
Okay.
done our segmentation wrong, and it's a really
Right.
really common thing. So I
Right.
let's right.
Okay.
I'm erasing any illusion that we had a plan, Colin,
Right.
by
Okay.
redirecting you in this direction. So
So
tell me about your thoughts on the questions people should be asking themselves.
yeah. So when I started thinking about this, I started thinking to myself, why do we have? It's a bit like what's a shipper? Okay.
Mhm.
I was thinking, why do we have segmentation? You know. And clearly you have segmentation to better understand your customer.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm going to add one small caveat.
Here you go.
You should be doing segmentation because you want to understand your customer better.
Yes.
There are
Yes.
lots of businesses that do segmentation and don't meet that, which is why it's a good question to ask. Go ahead.
Yes, no, absolutely. So I totally agree with that. And most segmentations, in my view, and those of you that have been listening for, do you know we've been going for nearly 5 years now? Or in fact, 5 years by the time this one comes out, we've been going for 5 years. So most people will that have been listening for that long, what, haven't you got anything better to do with your life? No, I shouldn't say that about our dear listeners, sure. But we'll know that most segmentation in both of our views is wrong. But if you take a step back and you say, why do you segment? You segment to better understand your customer.
Yes.
Okay. Why do you want to therefore better understand your customer? Where you want to sell them more by positioning the product or service or the message or whatever it is that you're doing to influence them more. Okay. And to get them ultimately in a business, to get them to buy more, really, So it made me then come to the question, which is, so how well, what is it that you are doing as a result of that? So what are the differences and the changes that you are making, as a result of your segmentation? So Vijay, if we were having a one-to-one now, that's what I would be asking you. So, A, how many segments have you got, and B, what are the differences that you're making because of those segmentations? Because that would start to prove to me that you've done it for those reasons. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I were to recommend a question that BJ could ask himself, if he's not sure if his segmentation is working, it would be a different question, but it's very, very related to the idea that which is, does your segmentation tell you why one group of customers is buying from you and another is not, right?
Yep.
So your segmentation should give you insights around the behaviors that you care about, and therefore should be able to lead to specific strategic decisions that you can make, right? Your segmentation should be informing what you're doing, just as you said. And the part that I would add to it is the reason that it should is because your segmentation, if done right, should provide you with those insights about how people differ in terms of their preferences.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that actually leads me on to another question that I wrote down that I thought was a good one. But it must be good because I've written it down. So it's always got to be
So
good.
this is another segmentation example where Colin thinks his questions are brilliant a priori, and I'm in a different segment entirely where
you think they're just stupendous, don't you? So it made the question was for me is, what data are you using to form your segmentations?
Excellent. Yeah, I love that question. Yeah.
Yeah. So I told you it was stupendous, didn't
I? That was accidentally a really good question.
It was. But no, seriously. So, most segmentations that I come across are still so basic, it's untrue. We have big customers, we have small customers, we have medium-sized customers, or, well, we've got customers in healthcare, we've got customers in insurance, we've got customers in construction. And you think to yourself,
I call that accurate but unhelpful.
Yeah. But then so if you start to think about the whole behavioral stuff, then are you building your segmentation around understanding why customers are truly doing things, and where are you getting that data from? And then go back to your question, which is, well, what's the insight that you're gaining from that? Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. It is really common it's really common for firms to just not bother to segment. That's really common. The second most common thing is for firms to segment based on data that's easy to get. So I had a student do an internship for a cable company years
Right.
ago, and they were very legitimately concerned with people leaving,
Yeah.
quitting their company. So they segmented, and the way they did it is they segmented based on their database. So they have all
Right.
of this information about their customers. It was great, all the demographic information, usage information. And so they segmented out, and they identified the segment, and they said, these are people who historically are likely to leave us and who are very lucrative for us. So that
Yeah.
was where my students' project started. They said, what can you do? Like, well, how can we keep them? And so he and I talked it out. And it was very clear within just the first couple of minutes of this conversation that that segment that they had defined provided him with no insight at all as to why they liked cable TV in the first place, why they were
Sure.
leaving, what they
Sure.
liked, what were driving their preferences.
Sure.
They'd use the data that was available to them, the easy data,
Sure.
but
Sure.
that data did not contain information
Sure.
that would allow them to get the
Sure.
insights that they needed to create
Sure.
the blah blah blah.
Sure.
So yeah,
Yeah. That doesn't surprise me with cable companies
no,
either.
I think it's very common. Yeah,
But the other interesting thing you said there was it's their database.
yeah.
And in my experiences, most organizations' databases, again, are poor.
Yeah, I mean, part
And
of the reason I like the example is because cable companies' databases are actually pretty rich,
sure,
but it's not necessarily rich with the
right
information that is
data.
necessary to answer those questions. If you have an even worse database than a cable company,
Yeah,
then the outcome is going to be even worse than that.
yeah, yeah. And in my experience, a lot of databases are very
Yeah,
poor because
it's a mess.
it's the classic stuff of they've not been designed
No,
with the right things in mind. So if you were to, and again, one of my other questions is here, which is, have you included emotions in the
right,
building of your database? So sorry, not your database, your segmentation.
right.
Yeah. Or what emotions are included in that. Now, most organizations will again turn around and go, no, we haven't, basically.
No,
So they haven't even thought about that aspect of things, which is again, it's becomes scary,
yeah,
and they haven't even thought about the other question I would be asking, which is, have you looked at the customer's behavior? So we know, and we've talked long and hard about, there's a difference between what people say and what they do. So does the data that you're going to use to segment it on, is it based upon what customers are saying?
right.
Is it actually, and even worse than that, is people's opinions of what customers are saying, yeah, within the organization? Or the other aspect is, that no, they've brought in other data from outside that looks at customer behavior, which is clearly a much better way of doing it as well, and
Absolutely.
looking at
Yeah.
what the customer's doing rather than what they're saying they're doing.
Yeah, there's also what statisticians would call as a selection bias.
Right?
If you are using just your own database to segment,
Yes.
then you are segmenting your own previous customers,
Yes.
and that means that there may be vast opportunities out there for people who are not currently buying from you that you're
Yeah.
just blind to because they're not going to be in your
Yeah.
database.
I tell you what, that it's just so prevalent
Oh
everywhere.
yeah, yeah,
Okay, I mean, I find it amazing that when we go in and do research with clients and we talk to them about well, we can do this and find out what drives value. And by the way, you should also be using this with the customers that have gone.
hmm,
Yeah. So let's have those as a different segment to look at. But also, there's this vast sway of customers that have never ever dealt with you. So that's a completely other segment. Everyone wants to look at what their existing customers are doing
yeah,
rather than the opportunities of this is why customers have gone, and this is organizations or companies that have never, or customers that have never ever dealt with them in the first bloody place.
yep.
So it's just massive opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, and to be clear, we're not arguing against getting insights about your current customers, right? You can
Sure.
improve the
But it's
customer
part of the picture, isn't it?
experience, all that. But yeah, like if you're doing a segmentation study, part of that has to include people who are not your customers, if you want to really get the most out of it.
So I guess going back to Vijay and his question, um, are you focused on the right segments?
Yes.
And thinking about this from a question perspective, a question is well, where have you got your data from to form
Mhm.
that segmentation? B, it is there a sub part of that is yeah, it's okay if you've got customer data, that's fine, but
Mhm.
have you also got previous customer data? And have you also got potential customer data? In other words, and and again, I would have thought with most products, other than maybe Coca-Cola or something like that, you know, mind you, even that's saying that's not okay. Sorry, I'm thinking about the potential marketplace.
Right.
It was the 80-20 rule that was coming to my mind, is going, well, probably 80% of the market that people have never dealt with before. Um, but there you go. Anyway, that's a separate issue. Um, but yeah, it made me so that adds to the questions, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, are you, including the right people in your segmentation? In other words, not just current customers, but also previous customers, also potential future customers. And then are you including the right data or questions in your database that you're using to segment? Like,
Yes,
are you just looking at a few opinions, or are you just looking
yes,
at past purchase behavior, or are you actually
yes,
getting data in there that can answer the question, what will make these people buy more? Or why aren't these people buying more? Or why are they choosing A versus B? Unless you've got that kind
yes.
of data in there, it's not great data for segmenting.
So let's take a step back here then, because and maybe I'm going to answer my own question. Because I guess the danger is, and I'm going back to this sort of stereotypes at the moment,
Yeah.
because the danger is that, and maybe this is what organizations are doing, isn't it? Is they are layering on what they think customers should be, are, or are, and therefore they're coming up with their own stereotypes rather than
Yes.
the data being used to define the stereotypes. Maybe it's the wrong way of describing it, but you get where I'm coming from.
Yeah. So this is a pretty simple idea, but it is one of the most difficult for me to get my MBA students to change their thinking on, because
Right?
it's not intuitive. So when we segment out, the most natural thing for us to focus on is the easily measured stuff like demographics, right?
Yeah.
So if we want to segment on a market, we need to know like how many men and women, we need to know like income levels and geography, and I really have to push back on my students over and over again, because that demographic information alone, it can be useful, we can include it, but demographic information alone almost always does not correlate well with preferences. There
Yeah.
are very, very few things that are correlated very strongly with demographics in terms of customer preferences.
Sure.
And so if we start with this bad data, I don't even want to call it bad data, incomplete data. If we start
Sure.
with focusing on demographics, then we end up with segments that are defined demographically. And then we need to back our way into, well, what is this segment probably like? And the only way to do that is stereotyping. And
Yeah.
it's like not great from like an ethical standpoint. It's also terrible from a marketing standpoint. So
Sure.
you've got a segment here of like, well, our target segment is, young men aged 18 to 24 from upper middle income households. And then you have to get to the question of, all right, well, what do those young men want? And
Sure.
the only way to get there is stereotyping. Right
Right.
now, it's like, well, what's my stereotype of a young man aged 18 to 24 from an upper middle?
Sure.
And then you create some offering based off of that stereotype, and it's just sloppy.
Sure.
It's not good
Sure.
marketing.
Sure. So tell us or tell the audience the difference then between psychographics. Where would you fit psychographics into all of this?
So psychographics is a type of data that can go into the database that can be used for segmentation. So psychographics is it's based off of the word demographics. So demographics describes a lot of our physical characteristics: age, race, ethnicity, gender, all that kind of stuff. Psychographics is where we're going to get at your psychology demographics, kind of. And so
Yeah,
it's not a super well defined term. You'll find different people using it in different ways, but some of the ways I've seen it used are things like a risk preference might be a psychographic characteristic.
sure,
Whether you're an introvert or an extrovert might be a psychographic characteristic.
sure.
Uh, Things like that, where it's describing now your mind. And in general, I would say that those tend to be a little bit closer to like the actual preferences that we want to get, and they can be
Yeah,
very useful to include in segmentation. In my opinion, though, it's still you can still do even better than that. So I
sure.
think that we really want to get to what's driving people's decisions in this category. That's the most valuable information to have when segmenting. And then we can layer on top of that lots of psychographic and demographic information to give us
Yeah,
a richer
yeah,
profile. But
yeah. And some basic things here, and I'm just thinking of from the audience perspective, because some of them may be basic shippers out there listening to this, i.e., shippers, somebody that's naive like
shipper, do you mean
my good
shippers
self.
or senders?
Yeah, well, whichever way, we're just going to ignore our customers and not talk to them anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But so I believe you and I are at one with, when the number of segments you should have should actually be a fairly small number, i.e.
Yeah.
between like 5 and 8.
I mean, I'll go even farther than that. From a marketing standpoint, the best number of segments to target is one,
Sure.
right? So if you have one target segment, that
Yes.
means you can focus all of your effort in
Yeah.
creating something that is ideal for that one group. I understand that practically speaking, that is often not
But I would even argue,
practical.
even if you think you've got one, you haven't got one. You've
I
got
mean, you're
loads. You
always
got
welcome
loads
to
underneath
sell to
that.
other people. Like you'll take their money, but the best situation from positioning and offering would be for one particular offering to have a very well clearly defined target segment and say we're going to make this the best possible thing for this one group of people.
But
Again,
surely,
it's
even
not
within
practical
that,
always.
you would have. Let's just debate that for a moment,
Yeah, let's hear
because
it.
within that you would have new customers, somebody that's only just joined. You would have, customers that I don't know where they are in the life cycle, but customers that are, I don't know, annoyed in some way or whatever else, upset customers. You would have now, whether I guess it is whether you are maximizing the sales to them is a different kettle of fish, doesn't it? But even
Yeah, I
even
mean,
saying that's a challenge.
so the basic idea of segmentation is that people are different and they want different things,
Yeah,
and so um, the best way to meet somebody in terms of what they want is to treat them as a segment of one, right? We can get into this topic of micro targeting and so on. So yeah, anytime we segment and group people together, we are glossing over some of those differences. So yeah, you're
yes,
right. Within that
yeah,
segment,
yes.
there will be differences, right?
And you just let me pick you up on a couple of words
Please.
that you use there, which I think are important. Micro targeting,
Yeah.
because clearly with AI and everything else, and that's where Facebook comes in, and all the main technology platforms, you can start to get into that much more detailed targeting micro of exactly what the customer is doing and saying and everything else, and that's where some of the psychographics come in as well, isn't it?
Yeah. Now
Because you can
I'll
use
issue the
that.
same warning for micro targeting approaches as I will for segmentation approaches that we've already talked about, which is if the data that feeds your AI model
Yeah,
is based on data that's not very closely related to preference and value, then you could end up in a place where you are micro targeting in a way that's not very effective because it's
sure.
not, now I will say if good AI models are good at finding the hidden connections between seemingly unrelated variables. So
Sure.
It can be a very powerful approach, but still at the end of the day, like if you're micro targeting, you're giving an individualized message to somebody. If you or your model don't have a good sense of what that individual actually cares about, and
Yeah.
instead you're focused on the fact that, like, oh well, I'm going to micro target to this person because they are also a white male,
Yes.
mid
Sure.
40s professor, and so I've got this
Sure.
other database of people who are
Sure.
demographically similar. Then you're running into the same potential
Yeah.
issues. But yes, there is
Which
promise there.
which is where, for me, behavioral segmentation is the right approach.
Yeah.
So
So,
looking at customers' behavior, irrelevant of how old they are,
yes, exactly.
and the geography and everything else, because those things don't matter as long as the behaviors are the same.
Exactly. So if I was marketing a technology oriented product, it would be far, far more useful for me to know that you are an Apple fanatic than
Sure.
to know your age and your gender and your income. Because
Correct.
I could create a segment, I could create an offering that might appeal to people who love Apple, because I can infer kind of why they love Apple and what the things are. And I could create an offering that would appeal to them, as opposed to creating an offering that would appeal to people within a certain age range.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. No, absolutely. Okay, so any last piece of advices for Vijay? He's secretly wondering. Just going back to his question, are we not getting the sales we need? I'm secretly wondering if we've got the right segments. How do I ensure my segmentation is correct? So, for me, I think I would go back and just answer some of the questions, Vijay, that we've posed to you, mate, and see if you can answer those. And if you're not, then potentially your segmentation is incorrect. And probably the biggest one for me is just what data are you using to create it? Because by definition, if you haven't, garbage in, garbage out. So if you've got the wrong data and you haven't even thought about some of the data that we've talked about, then by definition, your segmentation's wrong and will undoubtedly be contributing to not getting the sales that you need. So, yeah, what's your view? Any
Yeah.
last pearls of wisdom?
Same view. I'll say the same thing using different words. If your segmentation is not producing insights about what people want, what their preferences are, how they make decisions, then your segmentation is not going to help you. So it
Yeah,
needs to get down to that, what I call value-based segmentation, where we're segmenting based on what people value, based on what they want, and what drives their preferences and their decisions, because that's where the insights are.
great. So, Vijay, hope that helps you, mate, and I hope you get your segmentation running correctly. And we look forward to talking to everybody next week on the show. And with a bit of luck, my UPS package would have been delivered. You never know your luck. If not, I'm walking to Atlanta to pick it up.
Well, I'll see you here then.
Cheers. Thanks so much for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, please make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode.